What is up, everybody? Welcome to the TDR Devy Show. We're your ultimate source for college football, Devy leagues, and a little Dynasty. We sprinkle in a little Dynasty out there for you. I'm Kevin Coleman. Co-host is Jay Stein. We dive into all kinds of different things here on the show. And today we are talking 2025 rookie drafts, but not just the first round. We gave you the first round about a month and a half ago. Today we're going 3 rounds deep. We're talking 36 players plus some guys on the outside looking in, some guys that you can kind of, hey, these are some guys that are risers, fallers. We're going to be diving into the quarterback class. Man, what does this quarterback class look like right now? Where do we have them ranked right now? Like, where's Cam Ward? Where's Shedeur Sanders? Where's that value at? And then Jay's got a fun 101. So you got to stay here for at least the 101 and then leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. But if you listen on the podcast, we really do appreciate you. So after the intro, we're going to dive into a 2025 rookie mock draft. All right, here we are. First round here, and I'm going to go through the round, and then we're going to be talking about certain players. We're going to highlight some players here. For those of you listening on the podcast, I want to make sure you hear everybody. So at the 101, we have Ashton Jeanty. This is a super flex 12-team tight end premium-ish, not a very high premium in there for the kind of, so you guys know the roster requirements. But we have Ashton Jeanty sitting there at 101. Jay picked that. So if you have any vitriol for Jay, but we won't, because Ashton Jeanty, everybody loves that dude. So they're going to love Jay's pick here. At 102, Tedoroa McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. 103 of Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Missouri. 104, Emeka Egbuka, sitting there at 104, wide receiver out of Ohio State. Quinshaw Judkins, running back from Ohio State at 105. 106 was Isaiah Bond out of Texas. 107 is Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. And we did a 2025 running back class, and we kind of talked about Omarion in detail. We're not going to get to his detail this week, but if you want to go check that out after, I'd highly recommend it. 108, our first quarterback off the board, Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. 109, Travion Henderson, running back at Ohio State. Colston Loveland at the 110, tight end out of Michigan. And then Travis Hunter, 111, wide receiver. I got sniped in that pick. I was very upset about that. And then 112, Nick Singleton, running back at Penn State. To round out the summary of the first round before we get into the guys, one quarterback was taken in a super flex, which that's just one of those things we're going to be mentioning, kind of talking about. There's a quarterback problem out there. 5 running backs taken, 5 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. But, Jay, tell me why Ashton Jeanty is your 101 at this point.
Well, I think we sort of slow rolled this one. I think both of us were a little bit skeptical coming into the season about Ashton Jeanty, and I think I am a full convert now. The data is there; it makes a lot of sense, and he's getting first round draft capital. So this is going to be a tier one running back for me. And we talked about the last episode when we were sort of ranking those running backs. This is my tier 1 running back. You might have some questions about taking a running back 1.01 in dynasty leagues. It's super flex, tight end premium dynasty leagues. Maybe your running back isn't 101, but right now, given all the performances we've seen so far this year, Ashton Jeanty looks like the surefire prospect. And so I got to pick him 1.01. So just a little bit of an update. Right now, he's on pace for 2,500 rush yards this season, 34 rush TDs. So he's played 6 games. He's got 6 games more to go. If he keeps up the pace, 2,500 rush yards. That's 208 rush yards per game. The best single-season rush performance was from Barry Sanders in 1988, where he rushed for 239 yards per game. But he only played 11 regular season games, and Jeanty has 12 regular season games. So, last week we talked about how in my data mono, now he's a tier 1 running back. In 2024, for running backs with at least 75 attempts, he's first in rush yards, rush TDs, rushing yards per game, yards per team play, yards per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, the PFF rush grade, and the elusive rating, all first among all qualifying NCAA players that have rushed the ball at least 75 attempts. So this is a phenomenal performance. Not to mention he's 3rd in missed forced tackles per attempt and 2nd in breakaway percentage. All of the age-adjusted metrics, all of the PFF advanced analytics, all this stuff I just rattled off, It all makes a lot of sense. So I think this one is kind of a clear. There's maybe one other guy that I might take here, but this is kind of a clear option. Now we're just hoping this continues for the next 6 games and we stay healthy. That's all we're hoping for now, because he looks like he's on the path here to be that first round running back and look good.
He's got to stay healthy, right? Yeah. Stay healthy out there. But yeah, I mean, I think anybody, if you want to leave a comment about this, I think the biggest thing for me is in a group that you're like, you don't have that tier clear cut QB1, and in a super flex, you don't have that. It's really like, hey, what is those positions at, and where do these guys get drafted? And right now, Ashton Genty has top 15 mock capital. I don't know. Like, I think it's definitely first round. I just think, hey, if he lands with the Cowboys, if he lands with the Chargers, if he lands with some of these teams that people are projecting him to land to, if you have the 101, I mean, that's value, right? It's like Bijan Robinson. It's like these guys that we've seen before, is you take that value there. Now, I tend to still lean wide receiver because I'm just a elitist that way. That's what, that's why Cheddar McMillan, like maybe he finds himself going to the Chargers. He's Herbert's, wide receiver 1. I do think that there's a path for that. Now, we don't know that yet. Our next mock, what we're going to do is we're going to have landing spots. I'm going to create landing spots for everybody. But right now, just based on talent, value, perspective, Ashton Genty's fine at 101. I think he's definitely leading that category in terms of the most valuable player. He's the Heisman guy right now. And I think that will project forward going to the NFL. The other ones I definitely wanted to kind of just touch base. We got some shit on this show on YouTube. I'm going to say that for having Emeka Egbuka last month at 104. And, I was like, no, what are you guys talking about? Like, Jeremiah Smith's getting all the love, but Emeka's doing really, really well right now. Like, he is one of the better wide receivers there. And I am not a Ohio State apologist by any man. I hate Ohio State, but you see talent. And when you're looking at him, in terms of the numbers, I mean, 51 targets, 40 receptions, 500 and something yards, 6 touchdowns, but receiving grade. I mean, he's been very, very solid there. 87.4 receiving grade, top 15 in the nation. Very good slot guy. Like, and when you look at his hands, he has 2 drops this year, but those are, I don't know if they were catchable balls against Michigan State, but against Oregon, which was one of his better games, 10 catches, 10 targets, 93 yards and a touchdown. Now, he doesn't have the yardage. He's not getting the huge yak. But you know what he needs is targets and catches. And if he does that at that next level, he can do that. I mean, he's going to earn fantasy points. Like, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be like, oh my gosh, but I could see him having that Tyler Lockett type like career where it's like, oh yeah, Egbuka just earned 12 targets today. And people are like, yeah, that's what he does. So like, I do think he's an older prospect. He did have a down year last year, but he's doing everything he needs to do this year. And there is a tier after those first 3. There really is. There is definitely a tier. If no quarterback's going to jump into that tier, so it's really pick your poison. And I do think he has a fun floor. Like, I think he has a pretty high floor for a prospect right now.
Yeah, I mean, I like Emeka Egbuka. I'm going to keep riding him. I think he's really good. If just looking at the data, if you just do with a minimum 50 targets and you're just looking at Power 5 players, he's second in PFF pass grade, second in first downs per route run, third in yards per route run, 4th in targets per route run. He's got a low ADOT, but he's 6th in yak per reception. So he's converting that yak. So his yards per reception is actually pretty decent. He's 8th in reception yards per team pass attempt and 11th in EPA per play. This guy is putting together a great, another good performance this year, sort of like he did his second year at Ohio State. So yeah. I think he's a really good wide receiver. I do think that he's a little bit of a tier below Tet and Luther, but I think he's the next guy. I really do. I think that there's other guys that we'll mention here coming up, but I really do think that Emeka is that next, the first one in the next tier for me.
I mean, even Isaiah Bond is a reach at 106. I mean, I picked it, but I'll say it's a reach. I think that he didn't perform well against Georgia. There's some issues there at the quarterback position. Like, there's not that much depth at the wide receiver position. We were talking about that in the Discord that we had today. And we were just saying, hey, like, when you look at the wide receiver position, there's a lot of guys, like, but the quality of that depth is, I think, the biggest question mark. Like, where is that quality at? Like, there's a lot of dudes. And like, if you're looking at depth that way, yeah, that perspective, sure. But that is the biggest question, is like, how good are those players? And I think that's where Emeka he might not be elite status tier wide receiver 1, but he could be very, very solid floor wide receiver 2 with some wide receiver 1 spike weeks, which is like lock it to a T, right? Like you think of, I've always mentioned Olave with him because of that slot percentage and kind of how he lines up. I could see that. Now, let's talk quarterback. So let's talk about Shedeur. So I definitely want to kind of pinpoint this kid. First 2 rounds, we're going to do player basically profiles. First one's Shedeur. Next round be Cam. We'll talk about why he's not in the first round. But Shedeur, I think the question is, when you're looking at him overall, he's had a pretty good year this year, right? So, and he's got the size, 6'2", 215. If he can get to 220, that's kind of where we're at with him. But this year so far through 7 games, 2,200 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but has made some throws, man, that you're like, that's NFL throw right there. Like that does it. Then he makes decisions where he's getting rushed. I mean, if you look at time to pass, it's probably one of the worst in college football. His offensive line, he has no running game. They have no rushing attack, whether that's scheme based or personnel based. He just doesn't have the rushing attack that he needs to complement himself there. So when you're looking at this, now I took him here because we needed to get a quarterback in the first round. And I know neither one of us were going to draft a quarterback because we're like, but so this is my best case scenario here. Now I have still a lot of question marks about this quarterback class as a whole. But my best case scenario for Shedeur. So in my mind, when I picked him, he got drafted top 5. Yes, his last name might have helped, but you know what? If he gets drafted there, it is what it is. Like that's what we're going off of. He definitely does have throws sometimes that show that he has NFL caliber talent. Like he does put it on that, and he is a gamer. Like he's performed better. I think the leadership qualities, that stuff that you hear the story, I don't know what it is. Like I don't know if the leadership stuff is more media driven or if it's Shedeur driven. Like I don't know necessarily where that line is because I think sometimes it mixes. So I don't think it's fair to put it all on Shedeur, but I don't think it's fair to say, oh, it's just media. I think it's a little bit of both. So what does that look like in the process, the interview process, the combine process, all of that? But if he goes first round, he's going to go higher than 108 for sure. Like I think that someone is going to believe him as a top 5 in Superflex. I think where did he go? I think is the question mark now there. I needed to get a quarterback in this first round. Were you leaning any other quarterback? We didn't take a quarterback after this. So like, were you leaning any other quarterback here, or Shedeur's kind of like, you're just going to let me fall on that knife and then you'll take someone in the second round?
Yeah, I'll let you fall on that knife. Yeah, it's funny, appease the masses. We got to take the quarterback here and which one's our favorite. And it's funny, in each one of these mock drafts that we've done before the season, a couple weeks ago, and this one, it's been one quarterback each in the first round.
It's
been a different one each time, which is funny. So yeah, I mean,
hey, you know why we do that? That way I can clip the one we got right and be like, hey, look at that. We were on it early. This is how this game works. But no, I think it's just because we don't, I mean, it literally every week it's changed.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a lot of times. I think the real answer here is that we're just unsure because nobody really has stepped up and proved that they deserve to be that first round quarterback in this group. You have a couple players that are putting up good seasons this season, but I'd even argue that, and I'll run through some of these stats here. Shedeur Sanders could probably do some better, have some better stats here. So, I've gone through my model a couple times on QBs. This guy's he's 6'2", 215 pounds. I prefer to be a little bit above 220, but 215 is close enough. He's a 4th year. Mock draft database has him first round, 2nd overall. That's where the drafters are drafting him now. He's now, because of his performance, because of some of the things we've seen, the guys that are the experts that are making those mock drafts now have him as very, very early in the first round in most drafts. So that's where we are. So far this season, with a minimum of 100 dropbacks, he's 3rd in adjusted completion percentage. I was a little bit surprised with that. He was 80.7 adjusted completion percentage this year. That's very accurate. So he's 3rd there, 4th in pass yards, 3rd in pass TDs, 5th in yards per game, 6th in big time throw percentage, 6th best in the lowest turnover worthy play percentage. So he has really good big time throws and he doesn't turn the ball over. That's really good. 4th in PFF pass grades and 19th in total EPA. So these are really good. This is the positive aspect of this. This is a pretty good season, but this is his 4th year. And when we look at these age adjusted metrics, he's not hitting this year. And that's the stuff that matters most to me, not the accounting stats, but these age adjusted advanced metrics that we're looking at. That's the stuff that matters. So in his 4th year, his QBR is 72.3. So generally my cutoff's around 75, but if you're in your fourth year on the age-adjusted basis, you want to be in the mid-80s, and he's at a 72.3. So he's missing that one right now. EPA per play is at 0.314. I generally look for something above 4, but now that you're in your fourth year, I'm looking for something around 0.5, and he's at 0.314. So he's a little bit off from that. So he's going to be below the line on that one. And then you go to adjusted yards per attempt of 8.3. And generally I look for something greater than 8.5. In your fourth year, I'm looking for something higher than 9. And, he's missing on that one. He's at 8.3. Mm-hmm. So on all those metrics that I look at, including rush yards market share, which I think we know that he's not a Konami code QB. He's missing on his fourth year, and for somebody that's going to be at the very high end of the first round, that is a little concerning for me. That's somebody that I want to probably avoid, and I want people to take them high in the first round, and I'm going to try and avoid and find somebody else a little bit later. And we'll talk about some of those other QBs. But in May, I was not excited about this QB class. Now that we're here in October, I'm still not that excited about this QB class. There might be some shots, and maybe there's some higher probabilities than others, but still we're talking about guys that are not tier 1. Maybe we sneak a couple into tier 2, but most of these guys are tier 3 guys from the way I look at it.
And I think the biggest thing is if you find yourself trying to come up with as many excuses to buy a prospect, that's another reason to be like, maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm just like looking, because I do think Superflex quarterback values that are ingrained in our minds is like, oh, this guy's got to be here. And that's where you draft like Kenny Pickett at 108. Remember that? Like when that happened, the Kenny Pickett stuff.
Yep.
So like, I do think, but not that Shedeur is that. I think Shedeur is much better than Kenny Pickett. So do not put that out there. But just that concept, the value concept of the quarterback can definitely skew you a little bit. So if you feel like you keep making excuses, which I do, like I feel like I keep looking at quarterbacks like, oh, he does this well. Yes, he doesn't do this well, but I can overlook that, right? I can see that. It's like the red flags when you're dating. Now I haven't dated in a long time. Like neither is Jay. Like we are old and we haven't dated. But when those red flags pop up, like don't excuse them, because that's where you get in some trouble out there. Like from what I've heard, I'm happily married, been together 13 years. But when you're thinking of like those are where those things happen. So if you're looking at that from a fantasy perspective and you're looking at it from like this, if you have so many question marks for Shedeur, even if he goes top 5. That might be an area where it's like, I'm just going to move on. If I miss, I miss. But let me go get a player that maybe is in that same tier or whatever. But let's get in a second, because I think this is where it gets fun, because a lot of guys out here in terms of where we're getting deeper here. Second round. So we have 201, Caleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa. That is Jay Stein's love. 202, Jordan James, running back out of Oregon, who Christian Williams, I will not let slander go by him since he did not put him in his top 10. So just letting you know, Christian, I saw that list. I think it's ass. All right, 203, Ollie Gordon from running back from Oklahoma State. 204, we have Cam Ward. We're going to get into Cam. We're going to talk about him from Miami, quarterback there. Jonah Coleman sitting there at 205 at Washington, which I still think is unsure of if he's going to come out. There's some running backs in this area that I don't know what they're going to do as the season goes. 206, we have Evan Stewart, wide receiver to Oregon, who kind of popped off recently. I don't know if he's going to declare or not. 207, Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, had a really hot start, been a little banged up. Kyron Lacey out of LSU at 208, wide receiver. Drew Aller, quarterback out of Penn State at 209. 210 is Tez Johnson, little guy from Oregon, wide receiver. 211 is Quinn Ewers out of Texas, quarterback. And at 212, Dylan Sampson, running back out of Tennessee. Overall thoughts, just in general, Jay, 3 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 4 wide receivers this round.
Yeah, I think we probably missed because there's no tight ends in this round. I think there's probably 2 tight ends that of a caliber. But what's great is that there's so many good running backs that we just filled this round. We pounded this round with another 5 running backs here. And that's exciting to me. I think the dynasty landscape can use a whole bunch more running backs, and I'm excited. I'm so excited about this running back class. We got 5 in the first round and 5 in the second round, where it feels like the last few years we haven't had as many available running backs that we think are NFL type prospects, type tight caliber. And I'm just excited for this class. By the way, Caleb Johnson is also not in Christian's top 10. So that's two of them. My crush and your crush both miss Christian's top 10.
Yeah, and I'll say this about the second round too, just as a whole. Before we get into Cam Ward out of Miami, if you're looking at both rounds, that's 10 running backs taken. So that's what he's talking about with the depth, where we could have probably got a couple guys in that we missed, to be honest with you. As far as the tight end position, yeah, there's probably a couple guys in there, depending on where they go in that draft capital. They might not even be like Loveland might not even be that first tight end taken. We put him there. We're not going to talk about him, but I do think that Evan Stewart has a chance to get back up after his games that he's had against Ohio State, Purdue. He could declare. There was some question marks early. We talked about the panic meter. Like, man, is he going to declare? Is he not? If he can continue on this train, I think he's going to declare. I think that you're okay. Then if he does do that, I mean, Evan, I could ask you this question. Of any of these guys here, who do you think could get into that first round? To me, it's Evan Stewart just based on talent. There's some other guys, obviously, but to me, Evan Stewart, based on what he was before, if he tests well, if he has a strong end of the season and he does declare, I think Evan can find himself in the first round. If you had to pick anybody else, who would it be?
Are you talking just wide receivers or
no, anybody? Or anybody? You can take anybody.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of love out there for Trey Harris. Not my cup of tea, but I do see him in the first round quite a bit. I think there's going to be probably more quarterbacks in the first round, which you'll see in this draft. Yeah. I took a bunch of quarterbacks here in the second and third round just to combat the fact that I didn't take any in the first. And I do think that there'll be the potential for some quarterbacks to sneak up as well. So a guy like Drew Aller is somebody that I took as my first quarterback at pick 2.09. And if you're looking at the data, the stuff that I talked about, QBR, EPA per play, adjusted yards per attempt, all those pieces of it, he's a third year guy, so my model likes him. And then his dots for this third year are well above the line in those spaces. So the stuff that is important to me, Drew Aller is accomplishing. So if he's able to get keep playing well, have a successful season, get into the first round, be that young early declare first round that none of these other QBs are, and then also have those dots and the age-adjusted basis above the line, that's a guy where I see the potential of him potentially, being a first half of the first round type of player if all that plays out. But we're a long way to go. There's still a long way in the season to happen. But Drew Aller is somebody that's interesting to me as one of those early declare QB in a super flex type of draft that could push his way up.
There's a massive debate about Drew Aller out there. I think between the draft community, Devy, fantasy, there's going to be a massive debate there. But he does check those early declare boxes, and if he does do that, and he's got big games coming up, right? Like when we think about who they're playing, Wisconsin's a big game, Ohio State's going to be a massive game. Michigan. Not going to be a huge game because Michigan's ass, but they got to go win that against that defense. Like there are like games where you got to see him kind of take over. I thought Aller against USC looked very good. When he went, he drove him down. He had that best drive of his career. That's the type of things you want to see from him there. Now,
last year we were debating JJ McCarthy over and over and over again. Yeah. And I was like, he's popping on these stuff that it's interesting to me. And the debate over and over, he didn't pass a lot because it was Jim Harbaugh's system, and they like to run the ball. And he made some questionable throws and stuff like that. But when it came down to it, the data was actually really good. And then you go through the draft evaluation process, and he wins a lot. And towards the end of the season, and now everybody likes JJ McCarthy. And so, if that sort of similar process could happen, I'm not saying they're the same, but that's sort of the profile that could happen for the rest of the season with Drew Aller.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, the other guy I want to talk about is Cam Ward, because Miami quarterback Cam Ward is having a good year. And I've been a Cam Ward guy. We've talked about it enough. But, this year, obviously, when you're thinking of him, he's been in college football for a while. Played in 2020, the 6 games, 2021, 22, 23, and 24 this year. 2,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And I think the one thing I wanted to mention, like he's looked good. And Miami is a top 5 team right now. He's gotten away with some things. I've talked about Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde stuff for a while. The one thing also to mention is last year, before he went to Miami, he was declared Like he was going to go to the NFL. He didn't really get a lot of love out there and buzz on the market in the NIL market. But I think that he was worried about his draft capital. So he came back because I think he got some NFL. He probably got his grades and he was like, man, what do I do here? He went back to Miami. I say that just to say, like, yes, he's having a good year. But there is also like NFL's kind of already told Cam Ward what they thought of him. And I think there's something to that. Like maybe he's developed, maybe he's kind of answered the questions, which is totally plausible. But I do think there is something to that. Like when you're talking about those 50 or 6-year kids, because when you're looking at it, like 5th-year guy now, okay, what can he be in the NFL? He still has to answer some questions for me. Like, hey, what is he going to do against Clemson? What's he going to do in these big games and the playoff, those type of things? Because Miami's been getting bailed out a little bit in terms of just their team overall, kind of some calls gone their way. He's had some interceptions returned for touchdowns. He's had some bad interceptions. So I do think Cam could jump into the first round if he gets drafted first round because if he is talented, he makes throws, he does those things. To me, he's very closely in line with Shedeur. They're very similar prospects, not necessarily from a scouting perspective, but from a value perspective and what could happen if they get drafted in the first.
Yeah, so here's my take on Cam Ward, and I'll run through some data here. 6'2", 223, 5th year. So Shadeur's 4th year, the Cam's a 5th year. And Mock Draft Database has him a first round 6 overall. So draft capital wise, very, very similar to Shedeur at the very high end of what mock drafts are right now. So far in the 2024 season, if you look at minimum 100 dropbacks, he's having a absolutely fabulous season. So first in pass yards per game, in pass TDs, 3rd in adjusted yards per attempt, 3rd in big time throw percentage, 2nd in PFF pass grade, 1st in QBR, 1st in total EPA, and 3rd in EPA per play. So, then when you go back and look at his history, so that was all what was happening in 2024, which is just absolutely fantastic. And all those advanced stats on the age-adjusted basis for year 5, he's above the line on. The problem is that he didn't meet any of those age-adjusted thresholds until year 5. Yeah. So there weren't any like little blips of hope that you get from some other guys. In year 2, he jumps up above the line, a lower line, obviously, because when you get to year 5, you're expected to do a lot more. But he just hasn't really done anything till year 5. You could explain some of that away with his history. But now we're talking about a year 5 guy, and his age, and now he's popping off, but it didn't happen until year 5. We've done some stuff in our pod before where it was strongly cautioned against players that do nothing and then pop off in year 5. There's lots of stuff that I showed on a wide receiver basis. There's not very many examples at QB. The QBs that are year 5 that don't do anything, and then year 5 gets drafted in the first round and goes off. There's very few examples. And so I went back since 2014, so 10 years plus, 5th years with, and the caveat here is 90 plus QBRs, because that's what Cam Ward has now. Mm-hmm. He's a 90 plus QBR. The list since 2024 is Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix. Those are the guys. It's a very, very small list of guys that have been able to do that. Hendon Hooker and Curtis Rourke are both 6 years, so they would qualify that, but they're 6 years. This guy's a 5th year. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, and Baker were able to get some dots above the line prior to year 5. So that whether it was a QBR or adjusted yards per attempt, at some point in year 1, 2, or 3, they were able to show that there was something there. The only other player that wasn't able to do that was Joe Burrow. So Joe Burrow's example is that there was nothing on any of those metrics until year 5, and then year 5 he goes off and then goes on to be, the high first round pick. So that is of all the situations and all the screening that we do there, the player that he most resembles from a profile perspective is Joe Burrow, from how his production moved over those 5 years. And it's an interesting example if that's your like one player that you comp to. And Joe Burrow's now a very successful NFL QB, and maybe Cam Ward goes on and becomes a very successful QB. But I would just definitely caution against this type of profile over time. I would much rather have the early to clear, or at least the guy that showed the potential in those early years where they got some glimmers of hope along the way. And Cam Ward didn't have much of that for all 5 years. So that's only my caution there. But there's nothing to take away from this season. He's leading in most statistical categories and well above the age-adjusted metrics that I look for a fifth year. So there's nothing to take away from this year, 2024. But when you examine the whole package of where he was, it's an okay profile. That's probably why he lasted until the second round for us. But I do think in a lot of mocks, you're going to see, because of the weight of what's happening this year, people are going to weigh that more than the prior 4 years.
Yeah.
And so I do think that he sneaks into the first round or is in the middle of the first round in a lot of mock drafts. And, you're looking at us not taking him until the second round here. And that's probably a little bit why. But, it's an exciting year. It's a really good year, and you can't take that away from him. He's having a good year this year.
No, he is. I mean, and to those of you out there that maybe don't either, I mean, if you're listening on the podcast, you definitely follow college football. But if you're on YouTube, Cam Ward, I mean, his first 2 years, the reason why you see those numbers, and if Jay's saying, hey, he hasn't really produced, that was an Incarnate Ward, right? So it wasn't D1. Yeah. Goes to Washington State in 2022, and he's been okay. Like, he has had it, like, enough to where you're like, well, he's done something. But like you said, the small sample size notwithstanding, those guys are good fantasy quarterbacks. Even Baker's turning around now, like in his career. So there is historical precedence for this, right? I think he lines more with Bo Nix, though, maybe, because when you look at Jaden, one thing about Jaden, Joe, and Baker, well, maybe not Baker, but Jaden and Joe, their recruiting pedigree, where they came in, obviously Baker was the walk-on, and he really kind of pushed Oklahoma. But Jaden and Joe's recruiting pedigree, Jaden Daniels was QB1 of his class. Like Joe Burrow, very highly talented QB2, whereas now you're looking at it. So there's a little bit of context in terms of all of that. But I do think it's worth talking about him because I do think he's a fantastic quarterback. I've always really liked him. It just, can he be that Division I, that first round guy? Like, okay, what's he going to do? But he's still got time to prove it. Like, if he has a very good year, Miami wins a national title, baby, he's going to be pushing for it right there. Like, there is that possibility. Anybody but Ohio State is where I'm at right now. I should just wear a shirt that says anybody but Ohio State. All right, let's jump into the third round. We got deep here, some might like this, some might not, but Jalen Monroe, 301, quarterback, Alabama. 302, Trevor Etienne from Georgia. He's a running back. Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State at 303, which is probably the guy that should be in the second round. Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green is another one that's kind of caught my eye in terms of, I know Jay talked about a while ago here on the pod, at 304. 305, Dan Key, wide receiver out of Kentucky. Jaden Ott, sitting in Cal at 306. 307, DJ Giddens from Kansas State. Le'Veon Moss at A&M at 308. 309, Jackson Dart, Ole Miss quarterback. 310, Xavier Restrepo from Miami, wide receiver. 311 and 312 are kind of our shots. Some guys in there. We're going to talk about guys that didn't get drafted too. But Elijah Sarr, I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry. From Indiana, wide receiver. And in 312 was Aaron Anderson, LSU wide receiver, former Alabama guy that transferred over to LSU. So when you look at this, 2 quarterbacks taken, 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers, the 2 tight ends, who I think will have opportunity to get into that second round, maybe possibly the first round with Tyler Warren. There's some context here, but what as a whole, before we get into our deep shots, what did you take away from this round?
Yeah, so in the second and third round, I was taking shots at quarterback because I thought the wide receiver depth was a little light. We mentioned that. I still think there's plenty of running backs to take here, but we're talking about super flex, and I was able to assemble Drew Aller, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Monroe, and Jackson Dart in the second and third round, and I think each of those guys has just as good a chance to be in the first round as Shedeur and Cam Ward by the end of the season. So, you can argue about which one's having the better season or which one's a slightly better prospect, but in a class where there's not like a crazy amount of conviction in either way, I think those darts are a little bit easier to swallow, not in the first round and in the back of the second round to kind of get there. There's some interesting players in here. I do think Tyler Warren probably by the end of this will be, especially if he's taken maybe even in the first round.
Yeah.
I think he probably is going to be an early second, or maybe might even sneak into the first, but the profile isn't crazy good. from a age-adjusted metrics perspective, but what he's doing this season, I think people are going to like that. And so, getting him in the third is pretty good. And what I would say here also is that there are so many guys. I wanted to do a four round guys, because there's so many guys that I could fit in here that I'm really excited about. And there's a lot. So I would say this is a very deep class. The fact that we're getting into the fourth round and we still have guys that we're interested in and excited about. A lot of that eventually will come down to where they get drafted and their landing spots and all that stuff, and who we get more excited about. But right now, the fact that there's so many prospects that we can fill 3 rounds, maybe even a full 4 rounds, and still be excited about those guys in the fourth round is nice. 4 more running backs go in this round. So we had 5 in the first round, 5 in the second round, and 4 in the third round. That's a lot of running backs. Yeah. I would argue that there's a couple more that probably should have been in the second round that didn't make it because we were, taking QB shots or doing those other things. And so that's just another example of this running back depth of this class.
No, 100%. I mean, some other guys, running back, Devin Neal, probably should have been on the board. We didn't take him from Kansas. Khalil Mullings from Michigan. Kamagani from Rutgers, kind of having a down year-ish. I mean, Rutgers has just been banged up the last 2 weeks. They've been banged up all across on that team. Losing to UCLA is bad news. RJ Harvey out there. Woody Marks from USC. Katron Allen is out there. So Jaquarius Hunter. Like, there's other guys out there that we definitely could have added into that range. But I do want to get into this because we definitely took shots. We both have the same mindset area of 2 guys that we just want to talk about because we like them. Now, do they fit in this other area? Some other things to note, like Barry Brown isn't on here. We could have put him on here. It's just Kentucky's having really bad offense. Denke looks really good there. Le'Veon Moss is kind of one of those guys that I like to just put out here. Like, if you don't know who Le'Veon Moss is, go take a look. Go watch him. I don't know if he's going to necessarily come out this year or not, but he's definitely a guy I like. But let's get into these receivers here. So Elijah Surratt, I don't know how to say it. Junior, 6'2", 209. Indiana's having a fantastic year this year, and he's looked really good. There's 32 catches, 45 targets, whatever that looks like. And then when you're looking at also 570 yards, 3 touchdowns, what do you like about Elijah? Because he's a true junior. Now, this is his 3rd school in 3 years. Yeah. He went small school all the way to Indiana. But what did you notice about him?
Yeah, so this one's my pick, 6'2", 209, 26.8 BMI, so high-end physical profile. This is his 3rd year. He's not being looked at by the mock drafters out there yet. So this is definitely a guy flying on the radar. In mock draft database, he's a UDFA type player. But I do think that'll probably rise coming through this season just because of how good of a season he has had. So in the 2024 season, minimum 40 targets, the Power 5. He's 13 in receiving yards, 14th in receiving yards per game, 6th in yards per reception at 18.1, 7th in yards per route run, 7th in receiving yards per team play, and 3rd in EPA per play. I'm not sure. Most of the listeners here probably have not even heard his name before. He plays at Indiana, and he is at a high end of all these statistical categories. And you don't even know he's there. So in year 2, and now in year 3, he's pretty far above the line on the age-adjusted basics for reception yards per team pass attempt, and way above the line for EPA per play. This year, his weighted dominator is a little bit below the line in year 3, as Omar Cooper Jr. Has a bunch of yards as well. And then Curtis Rourke, who's having a fantastic season, he's spreading out the TDs. So, Surratt has 3. You love to see that be higher. But there's 3 other players with 3+ TDs as well. So he's finding everybody in the end zone. But Surratt is clearly leading the group in terms of receptions and yards. And you see that in the reception yards per team pass and his ability to have an extremely high EPA per play. Again, Curtis Rourke, this is his sixth year in college football. He's the quarterback here for Indiana. He just went down with a thumb injury. He had surgery on Monday, and the news wires are saying that maybe he gets back a little bit earlier than anticipated. They're hoping November 2nd on the calendar when Indiana plays Michigan State. A lot of what's happening, well, it takes a wide receiver and a quarterback to have good seasons.
Yeah.
Curtis Rourke's having a good season. I'm not sure how much of an NFL prospect he is. Probably be a really good backup in the NFL, but he's driving a lot of this, and so he did go down with the injury, so that's something of a watch item. But the hope is that Surratt continues on this excellent season that he's having. One other comment: Christian Williams, at the TDR here this past weekend, says, "quote I have said it before, but Elijah Surratt is an NFL guy, such a strong catch point player." So I'm quoting here from Twitter, Christian Williams here on Elijah Surratt. I think with the way things are going, early declare, all the metrics that you like to see on a age-adjusted basis, I think that he's going to be a riser here. And so this is my sort of shot of guy that I want to get into the third round to, hopefully help people learn about him. And I don't think most people do know who he is. So I think he's a pretty interesting guy here at the end of the third.
No, I agree with that perspective in terms of like, hey, who is this guy? Where does he come from? But yeah, quoting Twitter has never ruined anybody. So don't worry about it. If you can quote it all you want there.
It's Christian, of course.
Yeah, he's got some questionable takes out there. All right, let's over my guy real fast, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. Aaron Anderson, wide receiver at LSU, redshirt sophomore, has come on this year. Finally, I love this kid 2 years ago when he's coming in. Obviously, he was at Alabama, didn't get any run last year. As you can tell, LSU had some pretty good wide receivers last year, and Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. It just didn't really see the field. This year, though, he's slowly, 46 targets, 33 catches, 488 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's a little guy, 5'8", 187, but not little. 187 is what you like if he's really that. And when you're looking at it, yards per route run, 2.76, his 8 outs, 11.9. Only 3 drops on the year, but really went to him, especially in that Ole Miss game. He scored basically the game tying touchdown. And that was a big part of, hey, we're going to go to this kid. We trust him. His production's been there. I think I love that about him. Now, he probably comes back, but I do want to kind of mention, like, this is a kid that was on people's radars 3 years ago. He needs to be on people's Dynasty people's radars now. Like, just who is this kid? What's he doing out there at LSU? And again, like Kyron Lacey, these other guys, hey, you know what pans out in the NFL? LSU wide receivers. Aaron Anderson might just be the next guy when you're like, and now he's a different kind of build than what we've seen previously with Marshall and Jamar and those guys. But he is definitely someone to notice too. You have to like his yak per reception. You like his being in. He's a slot guy though, 95% of slot. But earning those targets, you're doing that with Garrett Nussmeier. If Nussmeier decides to come back, the quarterback at LSU, Aaron Anderson comes back to you could be looking at a very, very good year. He's just a redshirt sophomore, so that won't ding him too much there. Any final thoughts here, either on Anderson or any of the round 3 guys?
No, not on the round 3 guys. Anderson's an interesting profile. He doesn't meet some of those age-adjusted thresholds that I look at, but how are you going to root against and not go with an LSU wide receiver? So I do understand that. Yeah,
we keep things simple here on the TDR, and if they play for LSU, they're wide receivers, and they play for Ohio State wide receivers, they're probably pretty good. That's just kind of generally how we do it here. All right, let's just kind of wrap it up. We'll just talk about a couple of things. Best of the rest who didn't get drafted that could have. Carson Beck. I don't know. I'm kind of out on Carson Beck as a quarterback right now. He looked really bad against Texas. I know they won, but it was really based on their defense and their running back and ETN. Then you have Nussmeier, Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. I just think he's coming back. So I have a question like will he declare or not? Kyle McCord's playing okay out there. Kate Klubnik from Clemson's not doing too bad. I already went through the running backs, wide receivers. Antonio Williams is one. Matthew Golden's another one. Barian Brown, Ty Felton. There's other guys in there. Ja'Cory Brooks. Hey, we talked about him as a sleeper. We were mentioning him before the year. Alec Aon Manor from Stanford. Not really any tight ends out there that I would say out of those 3. I think those 3 are kind of the clear kind of tier of themselves there. But anything else in terms of best of the rest or anything else that you want to kind of mention?
No, this is exciting. I'm just so glad that we were able to get through three rounds of this. I'm not sure I've seen too many mock drafts out there going all the way to round 3, so I'm excited about this. And Just get everything that has to do with the NFL draft and evaluating these prospects. I love that. So, hit us up with questions anytime you want to.
Yeah, hit us up there. And then also in the comments, if you are listening on the podcast, we appreciate you. But if you're on YouTube or if you want to head over to YouTube, we're going to drop our teams. What team do you like better in terms of how we drafted? It'll be in the first comment that's pinned there. And then let us know. What do you think? Who are some guys that we're missing out on? Are there any deeper guys that you guys have out there? I know some of you guys are degenerates. We are also. I mean, we have rankings up to over 1,000 players. But, are there some guys out there that you're like, hey, those are the guys you should know? Hey, go check out this running back from Harvard. I mean, we had a couple of those the last couple of years. Like, what do you guys see from these guys? But we'll just keep diving in. I mean, we're excited. It's October, getting close now. I mean, January is the fun time when you start looking at your dynasty leagues and all of that. But as always, go subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast, go over to Substack. We do this for you guys. We appreciate all that. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.